You keep calling it overthinking. But what if the problem isn't that you think too much? What if the problem is that you've spent so long listening to every thought that you forgot they're only thoughts, not facts, not commands, not you? And that's a strange idea at first, because most people spend their entire lives inside their own heads without ever questioning who's actually speaking. You know that voice, the one that shows up at 2 a.m., the one that reminds you of that embarrassing thing you said 3 years ago, the one that predicts failure before you've even started, the one that turns small problems into entire documentaries. You hear it so often that eventually you stop noticing it. It becomes background noise, like a refrigerator humming in another room. Always there, always running, always consuming energy. And here's the uncomfortable part. You probably trust it more than anyone else, even when it's wrong. Especially when it's wrong, because it sounds like you. You wake up tired, not because your body is exhausted, because your mind never stopped talking. You check your phone before your feet touch the floor. A notification, a message, a headline, a video. Anything to distract yourself from being alone with your own thoughts. At first, this feels harmless, normal even. Everybody does it. But here's what nobody realizes. Constant distraction isn't always entertainment. Sometimes it's escape. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's a way to avoid hearing what your mind has been repeating for years. The fear, the self-criticism, the comparison, the quiet belief that everyone else seems to know what they're doing while you're still trying to figure yourself out. So you stay busy, you consume, you scroll. You restart routines, you make plans. You download productivity apps. You watch videos about changing your life. And for a few hours, maybe even a few days, things feel different. Then somehow you end up right back where you started. Same anxiety, same uncertainty, same mental loops. And this is where things start falling apart. Because eventually you stop questioning the thoughts. You start identifying with them. A thought says you're behind. Now you feel behind. A thought says you're not disciplined. Now that's part of your identity. A thought says you're not good enough. Now you carry that feeling into every room you enter. The thought arrives. You believe it. Then you build a life around it, without ever asking one important question. What if the thought wasn't true? Not partly true. Not mostly true. What if it was completely wrong? Think about that for a second. Your mind produces thousands of thoughts every day. Random thoughts. Fearful thoughts. Contradictory thoughts. Thoughts that don't even agree with each other. One day you're convinced you're capable of anything. The next day you're convinced you've ruined everything. Same person, different thoughts. So which version is real? That's when something strange begins to appear. A crack in the illusion. Because if your thoughts keep changing, then maybe you're not the thoughts. Maybe you're the one noticing them. And this changes everything. Imagine sitting alone in your room late at night. The lights are off. The world is quiet. And your mind starts talking. Maybe it says you're wasting your life. Maybe it says you're running out of time. Maybe it says you'll never become the person you want to become. The usual script. But wait, who's hearing those thoughts? Seriously, who notices them? Because the thought and the awareness of the thought cannot be the same thing. If you can observe something, then you are not that thing. You can observe clouds. You are not the clouds. You can observe traffic. You are not the traffic. You can observe thoughts. So maybe you are not your thoughts. And this is the part most people miss. The voice in your head isn't trying to tell the truth. It's trying to keep telling stories. Stories based on memory. Stories based on fear. Stories based on old experiences that may not even matter anymore. The mind is a prediction machine. It constantly searches for danger, problems, embarrassment, rejection, anything that might threaten you. Which means the voice in your head was never designed to make you peaceful. It was designed to make you alert. And those are very different things. Once you see this, You can never completely unsee it. But the real challenge isn't understanding it. The real challenge is what happens next. Because if you aren't your thoughts, then who are you? And why have you spent so much of your life obeying them? The answer isn't as mysterious as it sounds. But it does require you to look somewhere you've probably avoided for a long time. Not outside. Inside. Because most people spend years trying to change their thoughts. They fight them, argue with them, suppress them, replace them. And somehow the thoughts keep coming back, like weeds growing through cracks in concrete. You pull one out, 3 more appear. You don't notice it immediately. But you've been treating every thought like an emergency. Every doubt needs solving. Every fear needs analysis. Every uncomfortable feeling needs explanation. And that's exhausting. Imagine receiving thousands of text messages every day. Some are useful, most are nonsense, a few are complete lies. Now imagine believing you must answer every single one. That's how many people treat their minds. A thought appears, they engage. A worry appears, they investigate. A fear appears, they build an entire courtroom around it. Evidence, arguments, predictions, worst-case scenarios. Hours disappear. Energy disappears, peace disappears. And the strange part is, the mind always wins that game, because it can create problems faster than you can solve them. That's why overthinking feels productive while secretly keeping you stuck. It creates movement without progress, activity without direction, mental noise disguised as problem-solving. You've probably experienced this. You sit down to focus on something important, a project, a goal, a conversation you've been avoiding, and suddenly your mind begins negotiating. What if this doesn't work? What if you're not ready? What if you fail? Maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe you need more information. Maybe you should watch one more video first. And before you know it, you're scrolling, researching, reorganizing, preparing, anything except doing the thing. Not because you're lazy, because you've confused thoughts with reality. And that's when the real problem begins. The longer you identify with every thought, the smaller your life becomes. You stop taking risks because fear speaks loudly. You avoid opportunities because doubt sounds convincing. You stay silent because insecurity feels true. The thought appears, the behavior follows. Then the behavior becomes evidence. See, the mind says, I told you. A perfect loop. Self-created, self-reinforcing, invisible. Until one day something shifts. Maybe you're staring at the ceiling after another sleepless night. Maybe you're sitting in your car before work, trying to gather the energy to walk inside. Maybe you're watching everyone else move forward while feeling strangely frozen. And for a brief moment, you notice the voice, not the content. The existence of it. Like hearing a radio you've never paid attention to before, still talking, still commenting, still judging, still narrating everything. But now you're watching it, instead of becoming it. That tiny shift seems insignificant. It's not. It's one of the most important psychological shifts a person can experience. Because awareness creates space, and space changes everything. Without awareness, thoughts feel like reality. With awareness, thoughts become events. A thought says, you're failing. Okay, that's a thought. A thought says, nobody cares. That's another thought. A thought says, you'll never figure life out. Interesting. Another thought. Notice what happened. You didn't fight it. You didn't obey it. You observed it. An observation weakens identification. The thought loses power because you're no longer fused with it. This doesn't mean negative thoughts disappear. They won't. The human mind wasn't built for permanent positivity. Anybody selling that idea is selling a fantasy. The goal isn't silence. The goal is freedom. Freedom means a fearful thought can exist without controlling your actions. Freedom means anxiety can visit without becoming your identity. Freedom means uncertainty can appear without stopping your life. And this is where most people misunderstand emotional strength. They think strong people have better thoughts. They don't. They often have the same fears, the same doubts, the same insecurities. The difference is they don't automatically believe them. That's the hidden skill. Not confidence, not motivation. Awareness. Because awareness creates choice, and choice creates freedom. Think about someone learning to meditate for the first time. They sit down expecting peace. Instead, they discover chaos, random memories, embarrassing moments, future worries, mental chatter everywhere. At first, they assume they're failing, but here's what nobody realizes. The thoughts were always there. Meditation didn't create the noise. The same thing happens when you begin paying attention to your own mind. You realize how often you've been pushed around by stories you never consciously chose to believe. And this realization can feel uncomfortable, maybe even frightening. That's where the deeper transformation begins. And this next part is where most people either wake up or spend another decade trapped inside their own minds.